Hi everyone, and hi, welcome to the Shiloh. Hope you get herbal tea and local bread and Shiloh Museum honey. And I welcome us also afterwards for everybody in person to go shuffle through some prints over here on the table when we're done. And I even brought an issue of Whole Earth Catalog because I had had a conversation with somebody at the last event, and you asked me to bring it. I brought it for you, so we got Whole Earth Catalog for you too. Okay, so I have some notes to make sure we keep it on track, but I would love if you have questions, put a pin in it, hold on to it, and we'll share afterwards. Because there are some people joining us tonight who had a little something to do with this history, and they might be able to answer your question better than I can. So I'd love to defer to them in that case. But here, my name is Megan. Thank you. And I'm a graduate student at the University of Arkansas. Yeah, I'll finish in like less than 7 days. So thank you. I'm actually a student of art, but I'm really interested in this kind of local history. And I'm really interested in print history, media history. So this is all coming together as really exciting for me. I'm also Springdale local. I live down the street. And I have this interest in counterculture manifestations in the Ozarks. And I keep coming back to, in the light of the present, of things that are happening now, looking back to the past to better understand the present, right? And I hope that as we go through, you'll make some of these connections that I'm making too, because there are some definite parallels to some of the things we'll talk about. Got a remote here. Okay. So I keep returning to this quote from Kate Eichhorn. I do not necessarily posit this turn back to the 1970s as pure nostalgia for another revolutionary moment, but rather as an attempt to mine the present for signs of undetonated energy from past revolutions. So I think let's, we'll put a pin in that and think about that as we move through. I hope that becomes clear for you. And then the title for this presentation, sort of coming from this book from Kate McKinney, Information Activism. So in this book, Kate is a historian who's looking at the sometimes unspectacular labor that sustains social movements, such as organizing information on index cards, on notebooks, on phone lines, in publications, in print. Hi, Cecilia. And later on computers. So this book from Kate McKinney has a nice chapter that I returned to a few times about lesbian switchboards in New York State. And in this case, she's going through archives and she has these physical documents from the behind the scenes, the labor that makes that switchboard work. So I'm interested in these kind of intersections of social movement and media history. I get this question a lot. It's like, how did you get into this kind of stuff? And I think it's like just as autobiographical as anything. It's like a little part my family history and the place that I grew up. So I'm from Southern California and surrounded by countercultural elders. My mother was really young, and I think these elders played a really big role in raising me. So I think it's like this counterculture history is y'all's history, but it's mine too. It's my family history too. My grandfather was in motorcycle clubs in Southern California. My grandmother had her sympathies with the American Indian movement. And then my aunties and uncles in and around Chicano Park and Chicano movement in Southern California. This is also an image. The X doesn't mark my house personally, but this is an image of the community that I come from that literally did not exist before the 1970s. You know, it's like as deep as the history gets there. And if I track my history personally deeper than that, it actually comes back to Arkansas. And then before, some of my previous research was looking at the work done by historian Fred Turner. And in his book, Counterculture to Cyberculture, he's kind of tracing the evolution of the back to the land hippies in California, through to the cyber culture that would become Silicon Valley, right? So publications like the Whole Earth Catalog or the Hippie Bible for that generation of folks that would be homebrew computer club people, and then Silicon Valley giants like Apple and Microsoft. So Joshua's here. Joshua gets a shout out in this lecture too. So I come kind of preloaded to the Ozarks with this knowledge about the Whole Earth Catalog, about this counterculture to cyberculture, and I'm really curious about what made the counterculture different and how was that manifested differently in the Ozarks. So Jared Phillips' 2019 book Hillbillies went a long way for me. Pulling out some of those oral histories and the stories of the back to the land counterculture here. And inside of a library guide organized by Joshua, thank you very much, I found several publications. What a lot of them kind of end up being are these sort of like regionalized dupes of the Whole Earth Catalog. So you can page through that publication over there, but it's really about like not just the tools you think you need to survive off the grid, like you need a shovel, you need a plow. It's like the 80% of the Whole Earth Catalog is books, and they're talking about like consciousness expansion off the grid. Like this is the way we're gonna change these things. So what I found in this publication, the Ozark Mountain Times, was something pretty different. So while the back to the land countercultures want to make a new world away from society, in some instances this is kind of like away from politics, and we want to make the world new, outside of the cities, go back to the land and survive off the grid. The Ozark Mountain Times community and Ozark Mountain Times Collective was interested in surviving within it and surviving on the grid, in town, with political action and social justice at the forefront. So the first issue, which is on the right side of the screen, oops, this one here, is the cover. The cover story is about the strike at Standard Register. So we're on School Avenue, where a lot of what was happening around the university at that period of time. If the university is the top employer of everything in Fayetteville, the second most common form of employment, right, is like factory and warehouse work. So students and locals are a lot closer at this period of time to that kind of industrialized labor. So the first issue of the Ozark Mountain Times really existed to spread the news about what was happening at Standard Register. This from this first issue, I think, is really telling, and for me is a nice thing to hold in contrast with what's happening inside of the Whole Earth Catalog, right? Where we're going to expand our consciousness, and it's going to be this kind of like individual kind of development that we're going to work towards. This here inside the Ozark Mountain Times, these people are trying to run strike support. And that's a very different way of imagining or the world they want to work towards, right? So this is right, it gives you these steps, these calls to action very directly. Make a money contribution to the union, bring food and drinks, visit the picket line, and for more information, call the union Power to Unionism. And talking to this with people, it's been really wonderful to have those kind of embodied memories come back to people like, I was on the picket line. And I said, yes, you were, Joe Neal. So there are a few things, this is a wall of text, we don't have to read it all, but there's a few things that I'll pull out here, and that's this very first section. So 4 people, Joe Neal, Joe Saunders, Jimmy White, and John Cook, living together and working together to make up the nucleus of the Ozark Mountain Times collective. So we're not just a newspaper, we're also a collective. We're not just an idea, we're living it. And then the other thing I want to point out is close to, oh, you can see my mouse. So it's close to my finger here. So they also kind of lay out their kind of ideology and what they're looking for. Since as traditionally, newspapers have been the spark for illuminating social injustices in American society. We see as forefathers William L. Garrison's Liberator, which is an abolitionist anti-slavery paper. Idealistic brothers, the IWW Union, which is not just any union, it's the first racially integrated union. It's a vehemently anti-capitalist union, right? So not just labor power, but a special kind of labor power. W.E.B. Du Bois, who we know as a socialist, and Eugene Debs, a famous socialist, American socialist, and a host of other radicals who gave their time and energy building movements for social justice. So even if they don't identify themselves as any ist or ism, we kind of have an idea of where they're coming from, kind of ideologically and their visions. Let's see here. So the Ozark Mountain Times collective lived at 1253 Oakland Avenue, which obviously does not look like this, did not look like this at that period of time. But I love pulling out these images because so many of these places that are kind of at the middle of this story are places that we drive by so often and have definitely different relationships to today. So this one at 1253 Oakland Avenue. So inside of the Oakland house where the Ozark Mountain Times lived, they ran a DIY radical library. They hosted free potluck meals, free places to sleep, and more. The collective grew really quickly after the first and second issues of the paper, expanding even into a second house. If anybody can find me that address, let me know. And as those houses grew, as this community grew, so did the list of contributors to the paper. So what kind of things were we covering in the paper? Well, it was really ambitious, I would first say. But there were a lot of really local stories, right? Like this first piece about the strike at Standard Register. In the middle there, you know, the closing of a beloved local arts and culture kind of music venue. And then this third piece about traffic light disaster, and that's college right there. You can see in the photo. So these hyper local stories, culture, arts, regional, city politics, and investigative journalism kind of happening here. I was really struck by the stories about Fayetteville's struggles with housing. As we may or may not know, recently the Fayetteville City Council formally acknowledged a housing crisis. So seeing these same struggles reflected is both like incredibly validating, incredibly frustrating, right? For somebody who cares about this stuff. And then on the other side here, this Action Housing Committee is something that please, again, if anybody knows anyone who worked on this, please let me know. This was very interesting stuff to me. The Action Housing Committee. So it's a grassroots volunteer-led effort to rebuild houses. So if there was something wrong with your house, if your roof is caving in, you could call the Action Housing Committee, and volunteers would come and help you repair your house for free. So incredible. What also strikes me, not just the timeliness of this thing, but the ambition of a kind of article like this. So we have international news, we have our local stories, and we have international news and international conflicts, beyond what we might associate with the period, like Vietnam and the wars in Southeast Asia. So this is here two pages from one newspaper, but the story actually branched across multiple papers where they're trying to educate each other about the history of Palestine. And yeah, it's just for the sake of teaching each other about this thing and spreading the word. I think one of the things about these publications that remains super interesting to me is that publications like this are a way for a community to see itself, and also a way to teach. One of the other things that stands out to me is also the role of women in this, and women contributors to the OMT. So even though in the origins of the Ozark Mountain Times collective, we have 4 men working together in this really tight-knit group. By the second and third issue of the paper, you have about a 2 to 3 ratio, 2 women for every 3 men contributing to the paper. So really quickly, women play a major role in this. So what does the presence of women mean for a newspaper like this, for a community newspaper? Well, it means we get women's content. It means we get articles on women's health, women's perspective, and women's issues. And just, coming preloaded like I do with knowledge about these kind of coastal countercultural things happening, I know that this is also very early in the timeline for women to be taken seriously in these kind of social movements. So women as participants and Students for Democratic Society, for instance, are still struggling to be taken seriously in their organization by this time, 1970, 1971. Women in the Black Panthers, for instance, aren't playing such a major role until about the mid-1970s, 1974, 1975, with Elaine Brown's role in the Black Panthers. So sorry for the bad reproduction here. I'm going to be back in special collections, Joshua. Yeah. So pretty early on, we have these full page spreads of the newspaper, and they're trying to organize these kind of resources for each other. So you see under the emergency, a list of phone numbers that you can call if you need a place to sleep, if you need some draft counseling, if you need a drug halfway house, if you need birth control. A lot of these things we're kind of putting together, organizing this information, and putting these things together. You might also start to, or at least I start to notice, because I look at these things all the time, that several of the phone numbers listed tend to be the same phone number, and that's because it's not only because it's a small community, but because that phone number belongs to the OMT house at this period of time. So the temporary switchboard and the place to crash and the place to get a meal are all going to be with the Ozark Mountain Times collective and their friends. This is just an enlarged piece from the center of that last image. So, and I'll read just a little bit of this. So the reason that we do this is that we believe that it is an inalienable right of every human being to receive certain services free, no questions asked, with a smile and the blessing of society. So among these vital rights, they think are decent housing, nutritious food, full medical care, all legal counsel required in any court, whatever education an individual deems necessary, and a simple respect for the right to live. And then this last sentence, we believe that all people will work for the general welfare if ever a society can exist where a person works for everyone else, not the profit of a rich few. So by organizing this information and working together and extending civil rights and care to every individual, that's how they imagine they create a better society.
Sounds oddly like it should be today.
Yeah, it sounds pretty good. It held up well, yeah. So here, the temporary switchboard, it starts to appear all over these different issues of the paper. It might be in that full page spread, but it's also in the classified ads, and it's also, they just put this wherever they can. So what we're just talking about is the goal of the switchboard. And this era of the Fayetteville switch starts as a phone line and file cabinet in the Ozark Mountain Times house. So Fayetteville didn't necessarily invent the switchboard, right? But I hesitate to call it a copy or a clone either, because it's actually occurring simultaneously to what's happening in coastal countercultural communities, right? So it's happening simultaneously to what's happening in Haight-Ashbury. Oh, my battery's low. It's happening simultaneously what's happening in Haight-Ashbury. It's happening simultaneously what's happening in New York City, right? So it's not that it is a copy, it's a part of the same movement. Nope, sorry. So I don't think I got 1 minute into talking to local people about this without hearing Gordon Hitt's name. And pretty much every conversation I was having, I kept hearing this name. So Gordon Hitt is described by a lot of those people who I've had these conversations with as a loving and charismatic person with a kind of religious dedication to service work. Sorry. Joe Neal sent me this memorial for Gordon. Wow, sorry. This is that's like embodied or something. I don't know. Wasn't expecting that. Yeah, so Gordon, after his work on the switchboard, would become the director of the first crisis center in Arkansas. So it's like, I've described this to some people as like maybe you test drive it in Fayetteville, and then you take it down to Little Rock, then you take it to the state, and something about here that I gotta point out, if anybody remembers the way it is, please talk to me about that. Very interested in that. And friends at the Ozark Food Co-op, Cecilia can tell us about that. Farms in the country around Fayetteville. And his group of friends, the people that he's living with this period of time, is the family called us, right? I love the way Joe puts this, plus a large assortment of mystics, futurists, and artists. He gave his family a name, the family called us. So that this is not the building in which this existed, but this is about as close as Google Maps is going to get you. It's actually this kind of lot next door, because the building no longer stands. So growing out of that file cabinet and phone line at the OMT house on College, this here on College, a house that stood next to the Psychic Center, was where the family called us lived together, and where they have the switchboard headquarters. So I love this drawing of this building too. So the switchboard had two basic functions, and that's giving direct aid through shared community resources, and by connecting volunteers to people needing help. So if you needed bail money, rides, a place to eat or sleep, draft counseling, drug counseling, home repair, car repair, help, or you had something to offer, if you had a special skill or a piece of farm equipment or a truck, anything you had to offer. They also were organizing a recycling program in this period of time through this, and would also hold on to messages for people. You could call and leave a message at the switchboard and then go pick up your message with them. So it wasn't just a resource for folks who were in need, it was also a resource or a place to go for people who had something to offer, right? Oops. So I got I think I'm maybe predisposed to looking through classified ads. I just find them really interesting. I think there's lots of juicy bits of information. And I know that reading this paper, I certainly learned things that I wasn't going to learn anywhere else just by reading the classified ads. So a few things in here, you know, simple as you got a couple puppies you need to get rid of, you can call Murphy. The switchboard needs office supplies, OMT also needing some office supplies and typewriter ribbon. The switchboard, it is in the center here, needs jobs for the unemployed, transportation for hitchhikers, food for the hungry, tractors, seeds, and garden equipment for community gardens and farms, livestock for community farms, information on available housing, volunteers to help people, no experience necessary. And then this on the side was one of the earliest mentions I could find of the closet. So at 703 College Avenue, which at this point, this building you're looking at here is Baba Boudin's Coffee. I've heard some really funny stories from people about shoveling the mud and muck out of this building in order to get the free store up and running. So these of course also existed in coastal countercultural communities, but the family called us and the switchboard folks opened up this free store across the street from the switchboard, right? So you have to think about this 700 block of College Avenue as kind of belonging to this community in a way. So I can't hit those intersections without thinking about this history now. Hopefully this stays with you in that way too. The newspaper though, that was so useful for organizing some of these things, was not an easy paper to make. Between the second and third issue, there are constantly reports of the difficulties that it took to both make and sell this paper. So the university didn't want the paper sold on campus and would arrest anybody selling the paper on campus. And with like, there are many stories in the newspaper of like, they tell us there will be a solution. They tell us it's going to change. They tell us there's this new rule they came up with. So the trials and tribulation, even just fighting with the university, but also anywhere else in Arkansas, it wasn't much easier either. You know, you have people arrested selling newspaper in Fort Smith, people arrested selling newspaper in Arkadelphia, in Little Rock, you know, it wasn't easy to get this paper out there. And even worse, the printers themselves were being threatened with boycotts because of the radical politics that were going on inside of this newspaper. So somebody thought this newspaper was dangerous enough at every turn, it seems.
Solomon Rushdie would have said bravo.
Yeah, right. So the paper begins in 1970, ends shortly thereafter, really. It only lasted about a year, a little more than a year and a half. For a lot of these reasons, but also for really just interpersonal reasons too, just people interested in other things and moving on. But outside of the kind of oral histories that I can collect with people that I meet associated with this, the Ozark Mountain Times newspaper kind of remains as the only record of the work of the Switchboard, of the political organizing by the Ozark Mountain Times Collective, and family called us. So I happen to think that this paper is really important, so I keep working with it. So the final issue of the paper, I think kind of fittingly, perhaps, is a May Day special issue. And this issue of the newspaper is just full of calls to action, right? So meet us, we'll get in the truck with us. We're gonna go down to Little Rock. Here's what we're doing on April 24th, 29th, 30th, May 1st, and May 2nd. It's all these very direct, like how to be involved. Come with us. Let's stand up against the war, right? And even in the super local Rogers High School is organizing, which I love this. A group of Rogers High School students have organized an anti-war rally. So this, as the last issue, I have this kind of very beginning and end timeline for the Ozark Mountain Times, but I don't exactly have this for the Switchboard, which is why I'll continue to have conversations with people and keep sharing this history so that more people can remember and bring it back to us, because I think this is really interesting and there is no record outside of Ozark Mountain Times. So I've begun kind of on the level of a citizen researcher to digitize this paper myself and put it on the internet. So this, there's this QR code here that you can open up the camera on your phone and it'll send you to this digital archive. It also exists over here, so we can look at that together afterwards if you'd like to. And you can actually go through and read full pages of the newspaper if you're interested in that kind of thing. So I'm an artist, ultimately, so amateur historian, I guess, professional artist, I could say by this point. So I'm digitizing the newspaper, which is a photographic process. My background is in photography. And then I'm printing it out onto like overhead transparencies, essentially cutting these things up, and then I'm making new collages from them. So I'm sort of doing like you would lay out, like the Ozark Mountain Times Collective would lay out the newspaper. They have a really similar kind of analog graphic design process, I guess, and printing those things out on a 80s Japanese office printer. It prints one color at a time, but very quickly. So it's kind of between an offset printing process and just a regular office printer. And they end up looking like this. So the printer runs one color at a time. So I'm making this in layers with the transparencies, throwing it down on the scanner glass and hitting go and printing as many of these as I can. So I print these because making the digital archive is one way to share and acknowledge this history. This talk tonight is another way. And this print installation is this other thing that I've come up with. So by covering the room in prints, I have this kind of like mobile modular learning environment that I can take around to places in town that maybe shouldn't know this history. The audiences in town maybe shouldn't know this history. Oh, sorry, I should say the last one is down the street here at the Medium in downtown Springdale, formerly the art center of the Ozarks, right? So this used to be a classroom, is now an artist residency, part of the artist residency program. So I came in to the residency and put up this installation here. Some photographs inside of the most recent installation of this thing at AM PM, which is a little Fayetteville kind of DIY, both music and art and culture community. They're closing their doors. So this is as a part of their farewell show. I got to hang some of this in their space. I would definitely say that the young people involved in that community are very much connected to this history in the way that they relate to each other, work with each other, help each other. I'm also just keep trying to add to this archive. I'm trying to add like linear feet of storage to the public archives, to university archives, so that the history is more than this stack of paper, right? It could be this stack of paper and then this stack of paper, and then I made it a room, and then I made it a book, and then, you know, I could just keep growing it. And so that's what I've been working on here. So you can see on the table here is like one of each of the posters that I've made thus far. And then this kind of box set that I've just put together and had a conversation with librarians at the university. They will make a box for my box to go in storage. So it will be in university special collections. Hopefully the Shiloh will take one. I've made a series of these boxes so that this history can kind of live on in these spaces. And I will shout this out again. I feel like I keep saying it. If you or somebody you know has a memory of this stuff, I'd love to talk to you. I'd just love to hang out. And thank you so much. We've got about 15 minutes for Q&A. Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question, and then we'll relay any tomorrow. I have a question. Yes.
I'm so inspired by your research and moved by your emotions. I'm just curious if you have like a fantasy or a hope that there may be like future iterations and communal effort to keep something like this going or to re-engage something like this?
Yeah, I think I would love to tell the story of sitting in my studio at the Medium and somebody walking by who doesn't know me, doesn't know what I'm doing there, starts reading one of these posters that I'm making, and then starts taking down the phone number. It's like we still need it, right? So the first part of your question is like, yes, I do continue to show the work, this like collection of posters, and I'm interested in a kind of like community feedback on where that could live, on who needs to know this history. So the next place that will go is the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition. Somebody came to me with a really good idea. I'll take it to Cheap Thrills, you know. So it's like just through having these conversations with people, figuring out where it should go next. So just kind of keep it moving as long as I can. So my idea is to just try and continue to show the posters until they fall apart. In which case we might have to rely on the box of special collections or something. But by that point, hopefully I've made more posters and zines or whatever. Maybe somebody else has made some too.
Does that phone number go anywhere? And if not, do you intend to change your number to
No. Oh, and I guess this gets to another part of your question is like, so my interest is like, I don't believe that I can be like a replacement for social services, you know. Like that's not what I think is my like mission or goal or purpose in life. But I do want to think about this way of being resources for each other, and I think that's my my vision for my future role in an kind of like local community, in an arts community. It's like, I want to imagine an arts community in which we can help each other like this.
Come on, you better get in there.
Yeah.
Better come in closer.
Yeah, and there's,
I don't know if it's still going. I know they started a few years ago, but it was an attempt in a digital format of that sort of, I have something, you need something.
yes.
I don't know. I wonder how it compares to some of this.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, like these are ways of organizing information before the internet, right? One of the reasons why, like I don't need to be the human replacement for social services, but I also don't need to be Facebook either. Like that also exists. Yeah, and that group that you're talking about, and Yolidarity, there's a couple cool ones, and I think to me, that just shows that like this is underneath the culture here, or it is kind of like still active here. Yeah.
Megan, could you repeat the question or the comment that's there at Shiloh, so those of us on Zoom can hear?
Yeah, the question was, have you heard of these Facebook mutual aid groups and things happening on Facebook? And I'm saying, yes, they're amazing. And I know there are a few more groups that are organizing information in that way. Like, I have something, you need something. Thanks for your question.
I do have a question. Whose collection of the newspaper are you using to digitize?
Yes, great question. They ask, whose papers are you digitizing? And I've been digitizing papers both at special collections at the University of Arkansas, Fayetteville, and also the Shiloh Museum has issues of the paper. So I cover to cover got to photograph 2 issues of the paper here at the Shiloh Museum. So those are things that you can visit in both places, actually. If you make appointments with those people. Thank you.
How frequently were they printing Ozark Mountain Times?
It seemed like there's a kind of like a volume 1 and a volume 2 of the paper, and they seem to kind of publish at different pace, but it seems like almost every 2 weeks. Like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, there's another paper. We're just going. You might know, you sold the newspaper. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm just so happy you've done it. The Switchboard's a very special part of my life and very short.
Yeah.
And this is just so wonderful. Yeah, it was thrilling to see my name there.
Yes. Yeah, for folks on yes, for folks on Zoom. For folks on Zoom, someone is here with us tonight who sold the newspapers, and I met her at the Shiloh Museum at the last Not Strictly History conversation. Really cool. Yeah, so good to see you. So I was trying to get her to help me answer a question about how often they were printing the paper, but
It seemed like all the time.
yeah, all the time. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Who was that sold the paper? Who were we speaking with?
Oh, they asked who was selling the paper. It sounds like somebody else might know you.
You know who's on.
Wait, who are you on Zoom?
My name's John Cook. I'm on Zoom along with
John
Jimmy.
Cook's on
Oh,
Zoom.
John. Yeah. Hey, John.
Hey, John. Who is it that's speaking with John?
Huh?
Who is it speaking to John?
Dawn Bennett.
Dawn Bennett is speaking. Hey,
Hey,
Dawn.
Dawn.
He says, "Hey, Dawn." I'm the switchboard. I'll connect you too. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks. We're probably about done. If anybody has a little question.
Well, Jimmy White is listening in. I see him, but he's muted along with Sue, who was part of the Collective.
Okay, great. Well, Jimmy White is listening, who was a part of Ozark Mountain Times Collective. Everyone
Yes.
goes, oh, Jimmy, they know.
Hi from Florida.
And Sue as well is on the line. Hey, y'all.
So, I heard reference to Cecilia. Is that Cecilia hit by any chance?
Someone's asking about Cecilia Hit. They heard somebody reference Cecilia Hit. Yeah, it is Cecilia. She's here tonight with us. And so is Chris Klein as well.
Ah,
We should
wow.
say, Cecilia was instrumental in what has become the Ozark, what's the food co-op?
Ozark Food Co-op.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they mention you, Cecilia. Everybody knows you. And the real ones also know that you're so instrumental in starting the Ozark Natural Foods Co-op. So somebody's chiming in to acknowledge that. Thank you, Cecilia.
Those things come from seeds that travel from other places too.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of the things that went to Switchboard, but I live in California, they didn't have them there. And I don't know if it's really big. Yeah, my dog started growing. And my dog was born in California, and sure, he got on Saturday. And I did it for an idea for the beginning.
Yeah, Cecilia's just saying, if you can't hear us on Zoom, that also that travel, the seeds for things like the co-op, for things like the Switchboard may have came from somewhere else. And Gordon certainly spent time in California, so did Cecilia. So the inspiration for folks like the Diggers doing their work in California, something that they definitely brought back to them in Fayetteville. Am I doing okay? Yeah. Okay. Other questions on Zoom?
So John Cook had mentioned that when you were talking about Gordon, that he missed him. So another person who remembered that one. And then Jimmy White said thanks for the memories. And then Jimmy also had put in a comment asking about somebody in the crowd, I think. Is that right? I can see your faces. They can't see. See everybody. But yeah, it seems to be clarification. So I think those are most of our comments. And
great. All right. Thank you so much. I hope sorry if you're on Zoom, but if we're in person, I've got posters and things for us we can look at and page through. I also brought an issue of the old catalog like I mentioned, and then we'll meet and we can get you on to the digital archive if you'd like to see that too. So thank you so much for coming out.